You could start to practice looking at a crowd of people and then zooming into one individual and just practicing that habit of what am I actually seeing? What have I missed? So being able to focus in on what have I missed is a result of getting really good at seeing the negative space. Here are 3 things that I observe that the most creative people do on a consistent basis. So first of all, what do I mean by creative people? So just to level set, when I talk about creative people and the most creative people I know, I'm not talking about the people who are the most artistic people. And that's a big push and desire and goal in my work, is that we stop thinking about only artists when we think about creativity. Artists are exceptional at wrestling with the ambiguity of every single creative process, but they're not the only creative folks. And you probably recognize in yourself, if you are not a practicing artist, how creative you can be, especially, as I like to say, when you are toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. So when I talk about creativity, I'm not only thinking about artists, I'm talking about your ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems and deliver novel value. And so the 3 things that the most creative people tend to do. Okay, so number 1, the ability to slow down is a really critical and also relieving way to build our creative practice and our creative habits. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was in a ballroom dance class and I was practicing the cha-cha. Now, while dance is considered an art, there's still an important lesson here about what I can extrapolate from it into my daily work. So in the cha-cha, if you know anything about cha-cha, it's a very fast kind of exact movement of dance. But what my instructor, Derek, was trying to help me to do was, in the midst of that cha-cha, was to really think about the counter movement. And he was forcing me to slow down, to kind of turn in order to come out of the movement and strike out my arm, right? So that's an example of having to slow down in order to get the exactness, the rigor of that motion. And what I find in my own personal work and life is that all of the dimensions of my life where I am this clumsy student, as I like to call it, as I am in a ballroom dance lesson, that ability to remind myself that I'm actually not going to get the precision down to execute on this creativity until I actually slow down helps me in my work. So that's the number 1 thing I observe about the most creative people. Then the second thing that I observe about the most creative people is that they really embrace what we can call the negative space. So what's negative space? If you've ever taken a drawing class, let's say this pen right here. If you're asked to draw this pen, you don't actually draw the density of the pen. You're drawing the shape around it. You're drawing the contours around it. And you may even pay a lot of attention to the space between the clasp and the body of the pen. That space is called negative space. You may have heard of the FedEx logo, and any of you who haven't, pay particular attention to the shape of the arrow that appears in the FedEx logo. Really smart branding. That arrow kind of indicates speed, but being able to see that difference, to zoom in and zoom out, is an example of being able to see negative space. Well, it turns out that being able to see and shift your gaze is an important skill set for seeing opportunities in your own business. It's an important skill set to not just focus on what everyone else is focusing on, but, as we like to say in the fashion industry, when I worked in the fashion industry, zig away from where everyone else is zagging. That's another way of thinking about seeing the negative space, seeing the in-between bits that people may not be paying attention to, but actually has a lot of value, has a lot of interest, and that actually enables you to draw a better pen, build a better business. And seeing negative space just requires practice. I actually remember when I was a kid, summertime, staring out a screen window, if I couldn't go outside right away, I would just start doing this exercise with my eyes of zooming in and out between focusing on the actual screen, the grid of the screen, and then looking out past the screen to the leaves on a tree. So going back and forth. That's an example of that metaphorical exercise of being able to see the negative space. So it turns out that when we can see the negative spaces, toggle in between what's right before us and then what might be beyond, that's where all of the exciting opportunities are. That's where we get those aha moments. And that's something that we can practice. And one of the best ways to practice seeing negative space is you could start to doodle more. You could start to do a bit more contour drawing. You could start to practice looking at a crowd of people and then zooming into one individual and just practicing that habit of what am I actually seeing? What have I missed? So being able to focus in on what have I missed is a result of getting really good at seeing the negative space. The third thing that people who are really creative are great at is that they embrace creative abrasion. They actually lean into creative abrasion. They make space and time for creative abrasion. So what exactly is creative abrasion? Glad you asked. Creative abrasion is a term that Jerry Hirschberg made up. Jerry used to be the head of design at Nissan, the automotive company. And whenever his design team had a really big design challenge in front of them on the design of the steering wheel or a seat inclination, he would intentionally invite people in from different areas of the company. He would invite people in from sales or from manufacturing or from HR, finance. Now, a lot of the time, his designers would bristle at this idea of bringing people who are not designers into this problem-solving process. But that actually was exactly what Jerry wanted. He wanted to create this friction, this bit of tension that would come as a result of bringing people who had no idea what their design process was. He didn't want to eliminate the abrasion. He didn't want to eliminate the friction because he understood that at the end of the day, friction, abrasion, it yields energy. So he thought, if I bring in some other folks who might challenge my design team's assumptions, might challenge the way we've been thinking about the design of this steering wheel or the inclination of the seat, that actually could get us closer to the best designed solution. So being able to design space and time for creative abrasion is another really brilliant practice that the most creative people do. And it's really interesting right now in our time of AI and ubiquitous technology and autonomous vehicles and so much kind of FOMO in the tech space, we're rushing into adopting technology so life can feel more frictionless, right? And doesn't it feel frictionless if you type in a question to Claude and you get an answer within 3.2 seconds? But I want to caution us that we actually want to build in some friction. We need to build in some abrasion that challenges our assumptions, that helps us to see the negative space, that helps us to, going to my first point, slow down. Because when we slow down, when we're able to zoom in and zoom out and see the negative space, we actually are doing the work and the play of toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. So how would you create creative abrasion in your everyday work? Well, one thing to do is to make sure that you can collaborate. Make sure that you have a strategic thought partner who is challenging your assumptions. Now, I don't know about you, but I think most people like me don't really love to collaborate. We say we do, and I'm a big proponent of collaboration, but I also know it's really hard because when we collaborate, we're forced to slow down. We're forced to slow down because our assumptions get challenged. The ways we've always done things get challenged, right? And a lot of the time, retrospectively, when we look back, we realize that actually those were really good questions. Those are really great clarifying questions. And why do we call it the ABC of the XYZ, right? All our oxymorons get challenged. So being able to invite in creative abrasion actually can yield a more generative result. It can actually yield an answer, a new idea that you would not have thought of on your own. And so being able to make the time and the space for that is super helpful. So those are the three things that I noticed, that I've experienced, that really help to build creativity, and that really the most creative people I know do. They're able to, number one, they slow down. Number two, they crave the negative space. They find ways to practice seeing the negative space, the in-between bits. And number three, they make space and time for creative abrasion. They don't run away from the friction and the abrasion. They realize that that's actually going to yield much better creative outputs. If you want to be in a room with other people who are craving for the dedicated space and time to think about how to build their creative capacity for strategic and innovative results, click the link below and join the next Leap Lab.